Welcome, and thanks for tuning in for a discussion on the topic on everyone's minds, artificial intelligence, chat GPT, and Gen I, and the impact on tax, and finance, and accounting. I'll be moderating this conversation today. Here's a little bit about me. As the EVP of Business Engagement and Growth, I lead the Americas region for the AICPA SEMA, focusing on the corporate finance and accounting market and our Future Finance initiative, where we have brought together 50 Fortune 500 CFOs to reimagine the future of finance post-pandemic. I'm also one of the original 100 LinkedIn influencers and really excited to be moderating today's panel. I'm joined by two KPMG senior leaders, Rema Serafi, National Managing Principal for Tax, and Brad Brown, the Chief Technology Officer for Tax, as well as Steve Sweetman, Principal PM Manager for Responsible AI at Microsoft. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks.
So, Rema, you guys going to do a quick intro?
I think, Tom, you did a great intro of us. So why don't we kick things off?
All right. Well, as obviously we've talked a little bit about this, but this is a conversation on everybody's minds with all the recent hype, generative AI like ChatGPT, so many questions on the potential impact to business and the workforce. This quickly moved to the top of the C-suite agenda. We're going to answer a lot of the questions that are coming up for businesses on what AI can really do, and in a very safe way. So we welcome your questions. I want you all to drop them in the chat, and we'll set aside time at the very end to discuss this. So Rema and Brad, I know KPMG has a C-suite survey just released today on these topics. So let's start there. What are some of the key takeaways we should know about on the AI topic?
Great. So Tom, I'll kick that off. We're very excited to have this survey just released today, very timely for our audience. Just to summarize it real quick, we surveyed 500 C-suite professionals. So think CEOs, CFOs, chief tax officers at companies that have over $1 billion of revenue. And among other things, our aim was to uncover how technology like AI is transforming the tax and the finance departments. And just quick headline is that the respondents essentially hailed AI as the next frontier. And really, it was great. It was really interesting to see that over half of the respondents are already planning to invest at least $10 million or more in AI, specific to the tax function. And many are already using the technology. And basically, close to 90% are either using the technology or are planning to do so soon. And 100% of the respondents agreed that AI is going to impact their human capital strategy, their talent strategy. So not a lot of surprise in there in terms of, given the hype and given the fact that, we kid around that not every meeting has to include generative AI in the discussion these days. But it is interesting to sort of drill into the interest here and what they're willing to bet around through those investment dollars to reap those benefits. So I'll do a quick plug for KPMG, shameless plug. We're doing so much right now in this space. And we've been doing a lot for years now around AI, and now in particular around generative AI. And we're doing really well in this space in large part because of our partnership with Microsoft, and really kind of teaming with Microsoft to be at the cutting edge in developing our tools.
So hey, Rema, I'm all for a quick plug. So thanks for that. You may not have been surprised, but as a technology geek, seeing sort of 99%, 100% responses on the excitement around the technology, those were off the chart. So I did think that there was some, pretty loud messaging coming out of the Tax Reimagined story, not only around the tech, but sort of the implications to talent and sort of opening up the ability for them to do stuff. And you mentioned already, but I'll pile on just a bit. KPMG's been after the AI space for a while. So it's refreshing to hear that, hey, we're looking at this, 99% looking at it as the new frontier, that it's arrived. And great segue in terms of our working with Microsoft. So over this decade-long journey we've been on, close collaboration with Microsoft. We can go into some detail as we go through this conversation about, over the last year, our focus on Gen AI, which has been super exciting. So again, just to plug the survey one last time, there was some head notes. I mean, really the resounding headline was really, when armed with the right tech, the right tools, the right talent, tax departments are really feeling that they can drive value for the business, and the business is feeling that. So pretty encouraging head notes from the survey.
Yeah. So Steve, we met a few years ago at an AI CPA digital CPA program in Seattle, and it's certainly great to reconnect in this forum, but you've been working in responsible AI at Microsoft for a while. Give us some background on your role, and what does this actually mean in practice?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Great to see you again. And Brad and Rema, great to be here with you. My journey in responsible AI actually began on March 24th, 2016. I remember that date like it was yesterday, because we were on the cusp of a different kind of innovation. We were on the cusp of natural language understanding that really opened up the world of bots, which we see in businesses all over the world today. But that was a special moment because Microsoft had tried something new. We tried creating a bot that learned from the internet and was designed to be a friendly neighborhood chit-chat bot. But in 24 hours, some malicious actors began a data poisoning attack, and it became racist, denigrating, and hateful. And that was an awakening moment for me, because I was actually in a CTO function like Brad, and we've been building bots for a lot of customers, and I thought ethics was an interesting area of research. I didn't realize it's something we had to put into practice at that moment 7 years ago. And so since then, my journey has been one of implementing principles, partnering across the company as we establish our frameworks for policies and governance. And currently I lead a set of engineering teams that actually looks at how we turn those principles together with our mission to empower every person on the planet with technology, together with the tools that they need, such as our responsible AI dashboard that can be used to actually assess the fairness, the explainability, and the capability of these technologies. And so that's really been my journey across the company as we think about what responsible AI means, how to do this, both in terms of the governance and the responsibility in terms of risk that we think about, the principles and the practices that we think about, but also the tools and the technology too.
So that's really fascinating. And I remember you were talking about this back in of course, that was even after all this happened, but this whole ethics conversation is huge. And I'm sure it's going to show up, like we're anticipating, it's going to show up in accounting standards. It's probably going to be involved in the SEC reporting areas. Like all those things, I think is going to be touched. So it's good to hear that companies like Microsoft are investing and thinking about it from that standpoint. So we'll certainly be talking to you more in the future, I'm sure. Now, as Rema and Brad shared, you're working closely with KPMG on these generative AI that are transforming how people work, and how you and KPMG both can deliver solutions for organizations across the globe. Tell us more about that, and what are some of the biggest opportunities for businesses across industries in adopting AI?
Yeah, and the partnership with KPMG is really special because few companies are actually in a position to really transform businesses the way that KPMG is. And generative AI as a technology is truly a transformative technology. So let me unpack that a little bit for a moment. We hear this buzzword of generative AI, but what do we really mean? Fundamentally, these are models that have been trained on internet scale data. But in many ways, like all of us go to school to learn, it's not so much about the content of what we learn, but it's about the learning process and how that applies to new information we see every day. And that's true with these generative models too. They've been trained on large scale data, but it's not so much about what they know, it's rather about what they know what to do with that information. And so what I mean by that is, what you see us doing at Microsoft is taking these generative AI models and using them to create copilots that can help you as an organization search through your information and reason over it and understand it, whether that's the Bing copilot that helps with internet information, or the Microsoft 365 copilot that helps you with your corporate data. Well, the number one application that we see most companies wanting to do today is to build their own ChatGPT for their enterprise or their own copilot with their information, whether that's information from a line of business, whether that's information from even a tax system that they're looking through. They're wanting to use that summarization, that question and answer capability to actually go in and reason over their own information and present that in a way that people can interact with in a very natural and a reasoning way. But the beautiful thing is it doesn't just work with text information. In fact, we see developers using these copilots to help them code as well. So we're seeing the transformation even in our own technology industry. And we're seeing to break through more and more different kinds of data. And that's where that partnership with KPMG is really special as we think about all the different areas of the business where we have information today that's ripe to be unlocked with this massive reasoning power of these generative models.
So I love the term copilot, and it's funny. We just had a major conference a couple of weeks ago, and we had a panel of large corporate CFOs who were actually using early editions, I guess, of Copilot built into their Office applications, and they were just touting the productivity gains. They said, when they're on a Teams call, the Copilot is like transcribing it, but then it turns it into, here are the 5 major things that came out of it, 5 actions that we need to take from this meeting. And then it actually schedules meetings in Outlook, they said, that would actually say, here's when we should be meeting to follow up on this meeting. And that's like having a personal project manager added to your team from that standpoint. So they were just all over that. And that's a great living example. Plus our corporate finance teams and taxes we're seeing from this survey, they're all seeing AI being incorporated into just about every major enterprise application. So if it's not in there today, it will be in there tomorrow. And so between the productivity component that you're offering with a whole Microsoft Office suite and these enterprise things, I think we're going to see this across all the core industry. And of course, public accounting, just like KPMG is using those AI tools in their audits. So with that, let's go to Brad now and say, how does this resonate with you in terms of how KPMG sees the potential for AI? How do you think it's going to impact professional services specifically?
Yeah, right on. So Steve was doing a great job sort of teeing up, and Microsoft through Azure Open AI has put an amazing capability in our hands. So it's like the foundation layer. Where we're focused now is, how to wrap that around tax use cases. And they go for sort of the mundane to the fairly sophisticated. I saw a question pop up in chat about, hey, can I get rid of any tedious tasks? So there's a bunch on that end of the spectrum that we're seeing daily. How about receiving tons of emails that are fairly lengthy and trying to sort out, are there interesting things around that? Literally, leveraging Azure Open AI, we've been able to craft that where it's reading our emails that we decide for it to read and help summarize and extract data. So just accelerating, on a very tedious task. A little bit more interesting is imagine getting regulatory updates from tax authorities around the globe and, watching the legislative process, again, feeding sort of current legislative process or laws that can be very voluminous into our Copilot, and again, extracting out. So I did this just the other day. South Africa put something out there around BEPS 2.0, Pillar 2. And, you could see it went through that entire law and saw that there was a debate going on with respect to that issue, like on page 80. So, and it wouldn't have been found by a keyword search. You really had to have that semantic capability of ChatGPT to find it. So, we're starting to see it quite a bit, ranging for kind of the mundane. One of the most exciting, I feel, is the ability, and Steve teased it out just a little bit, the ability to interact with data. So tax data. One of the hard things for us is to go find data, sort of these needles in the haystack, and the ability just to feed it massive amounts of data and say, hey, find me the interesting bits in that massive amount of data. Again, just, a huge accelerator. So a lot of cool stuff coming out of it.
That's awesome. And we're seeing it show up in just about every area, from personal productivity, which we just talked about, to these large analytical models, RPA, robotic process automation, and every major accounting technology, they're building it into their applications, all at an accelerating rate since just the beginning of this year. I mean, we're really only like less than 6 months, basically, since the hype started, and it's just been. And I think about this. Remember the COVID accelerator? They say COVID accelerated technology probably by 5 years on average. I think we're hitting another amplification, or I would call it the new Chat GPT accelerator going on right now. And I think we all have to pay attention to this pace of accelerating technology changes. Maybe Brad, you can talk about this. When you're in front of the C-suite and you hear from your partners, what are they hearing from some of these folks, and how are you all at KPMG advising them when it comes to think about AI?
Yeah, so let me start, maybe pull Steve in as well. So doing a lot of meetings with clients, a lot of work with clients, as you can imagine. I mean, you nailed it. This thing is moving so quick and folks are seeing value from it so quickly that there's tons of interest. So there's two threads that seem top of mind in all the meetings I'm going to. One thread around a little bit what you're teasing out, what can it do and why should we do it? So sort of this issue about how do I look across my organization and figure out where this fits? So lots of, hey, let me look at my end-to-end business processes and figure out where this fits. And so that for sure is sort of the gating question. And you can get it. They're assessing the value moving forward. But right on the heels of that is, how can I do this safely? And so, and I mean, a nanosecond after they figure out, okay, that's a cool idea. Tell me, let's work through how can this be done, in an ethically and responsible way, worried about cybersecurity and their data. So really, those are the two big topics, Tom, I hear. And I don't know, Steve, I'm sure you're hearing, if not both, certainly that second issue.
Yeah, Brad, you're spot on in terms of the key issues. And in fact, I think this acceleration of technology, the opportunity that the technology poses to transform business, is also a risk. And with any risk, one of the key things to do is to first upfront acknowledge those risks and to understand which are the areas that we do need to pay attention to, and which are the areas that we need to ensure that we're building around trusted platforms. And so one of those big risks you mentioned as well. Okay, there's some big questions we have. What happens to my data when I feed these things? And so right up front, if you're using a trusted service like Azure Open AI, the answer is your data is your data. These large models will process that information, but no information is stored, no information is kept or used to train these large models. That data stays entirely in the control of the organization. But that's certainly a question that we most commonly get is, okay, what's happening to my data and how do I retain control? But those are not the only kind of risks. And before I dive into the risks, I do want to come back to that first piece of the opportunities, because what we are seeing is, with any great innovation, what we need to do is balance that, hey, we should innovate and we should innovate with governance. And so the places to innovate and the opportunities is to start around understanding, where do I have untapped potential for actually deriving more value from my data? And how do I actually create little centers of excellence around those, where I'm bringing together business professionals, business consultants, together with developers who know the technology and how we can unlock those challenges. But then let's talk to the risks for a moment. As we think about the risks and we bring all those different capabilities together, one of the key things that in the past with classical machine learning that we've worried about is things like, hey, is it explainable and is it fair? And while those issues are still valid issues for us, we also have a set of new issues with these generative models because of the fact that they're creating new content. So let me quickly just talk about the top risks we see. The first set of risks we talk about is what we consider as content harms. That is this thing going to generate content that's inappropriate for my context? Is it actually going to say something that's perhaps denigrating and hateful, like that first story that I talked about right at the beginning? And how do we ensure that it's not going to do that? So we've got services like Azure Content Safety, for example, that will filter both the inputs that people put into these systems, but also the outputs that come out of these systems, so that you can actually establish what those safe barriers are for you and your organization. The second key thing is that these systems by nature want to generate content. So when you're using it, Brad, you shared that great example of looking through a new policy that's being released in South Africa. Well, I want to make sure that as it's summarizing that policy, it's only generating content that comes from that policy. It's not fabricating information that it's made up. It has to be grounded in the source. And so the way that we instruct these systems, but also the way we test and measure them is really important. Not only are we measuring for the quality, but we're measuring for the groundedness to ensure that it's aligned to the content we're feeding it. And then we talked about the content concerns. And certainly one is, hey, is my data being protected? Am I using a trusted service? But also all the information being generated, that's your company data. So how are you governing and protecting the generated information? What controls are you putting around that too? And then finally, like any new technology, there are new attack vectors. And we have protective services, again, like Azure Content Safety, to ensure that malicious actors aren't actually trying to instruct these things to do things that they shouldn't. So those are the top risks that we hear. And I do want to highlight one thing. With these new risks, also, there are new ways to mitigate those risks. So one of the things that we're most excited about right now is that perhaps the best way to test any system is to get a whole bunch of people, whether it's internally in your organization or people that you hire, to go and randomly test these systems. But of course, that doesn't scale, endlessly. So what if we could actually harness the power of one of these generative models to replicate the testing capabilities of people? And we call that LLM assisted or large language model assisted evaluation. And so we actually have a whole new suite of tools which you can give the same instructions that you might give to internal testers to actually go and use a model to simulate the same tests that people would do, of course, at endless scale. And so together with new risks also comes new opportunities for mitigating those risks, and we're really excited about those opportunities as well.
So you're actually answering a couple of the questions that are in the chat, Steve, as we go forward on this. Brad, any thoughts on that? So what do we think the impact on the profession is going to be? Let's talk about that talent piece. And then looking at the time, we'll probably begin to segue into a wrap up and take a couple more of those questions.
I'm not sure if that question was for Brad or me, but I'll jump in and talk about. Okay, Brad, yeah, you go for it. Talk about the talent impact.
Yeah. Yes. So I'll go quick, Steve, leave you room. I mean, the headline for me, Tom, is we just got a new team member. Gen AI, ChatGPT, Azure Open AI. It's a new team member. So in the professional services world, it's a team-based model, and this new team member plugs in with our team. It has a really unique, cool set of skills. It's got analytical skills. It's got drafting skills. It's got version control skills. So, I mean, when you look at it, it just has an interesting set of skills. So for us, I think what you'll see both ourselves and our clients do is figure out, how do I integrate that team member into everything I do? Yeah. And so I think that's the arc we're on. And, which I think is kind of ties off Steve's last comment about sort of how the responsible approach on AI. This is clearly a machine and human partnership. So all the tools Steve's talking about is putting it in front of us to say, hey, do I have faith in this answer? I can see the citation. I can see the thought process with which it got to the answer, and having that human review it. Again, it's like I would have from us, another team member. I would see what they would provide and I would review it. So really easiest concept for me is think you got a new team member and they got a really cool suite of skills.
And they're really fast.
They're fast. I just, as a funny aside, one thing I really like is its iteration in terms of doing, new drafts. You give it a human team member, here are the few things I'd like you to change. Could you flip a new version to me? And you give that to Azure Open AI, and the speed at which these things come back to you, quite different. So we talk about the repetitive, tedious tasks that we can get away. That versioning has been one of the things that everybody's really enjoying.
Yeah. Yeah, real quick, it's worth reminding this audience, because a lot of corporates have actually banned it. So while the survey is talking about many who are saying we need to invest in it, and many saying we need to accelerate that investment, some are saying they're banning it internally because of the risk of their data. So I think that the answer is, if you don't have a system like Microsoft Copilot that's inside your system that you control, right, your own instance, so to speak, that's where you can use it effectively with your own data. Outside, you could use it for productivity, but you don't want to be putting in any public data from your company or your personal area in there, because it's going out to the whole world, right? That's what I've heard. Steve, any comments from you on that? Because you're the expert on all this.
Yeah, and this is where I think that the popularity of ChatGPT has also been, in a way, the challenge. And what I mean by that is, the first version of ChatGPT that was released was a beta version. It was a trial version. It was internet. It was public. Everything that was put in there was used to make the next version better, just like anything you'd put out on the internet. And that has kind of spilled over into all the other underlying services. So it is worth distinguishing that public version is backed by a set of models. Those models, we call them the GPT models. GPT 3.5, GPT-4 is the latest version. Those models are available to enterprises as well, whether through OpenAI or Azure as a service. And those enterprise models are very different to the public models in that they do not take any of that information in. And so, companies kind of put these early bans in place because they saw some of the headlines about information being used or leaked for somewhat good reasons, but now it's worth saying, hey, that's a limited approach. What's far better to do is actually put governance in place, ensure that there's access to the right models and to the right services with controls.
Exactly. And then, of course, obviously we have the whole apocalypse stories of the end of accounting because of all the automation that's coming at us, right? I remember there was a Wall Street Journal in 1979 about another Microsoft product, Excel at the time. And I think they added VisiCalc to that, but they said it was going to eliminate all the accountants. This is 1979, right? Instead, the exact opposite occurred. Accounting blew up because now there was a lot more power to analyze things. So I think the right way to think about all this comes from Marina Gorbis, who's at the Institute for the Future out in California. And she calls it AI equals amplified individual. Let AI automate all the routine tasks and reconciliations and all that, analytic stuff, and free us up for the highest value work, which is insights and judgment. And that is uniquely human skills at this stage. And so by understanding and adopting AI responsibly, I think working side by side with it, as Brad, you said, and Steve, you said, accounting professionals can amplify our impact in all these organizations. I think like you said, it's hiring another person on your team who works side by side with your group to really amplify and augment all the folks on the core teams. So that would be where I would go with this. Any closing comments? Because I think we're coming at the bottom and we'll try to take a few more questions. So let's take the questions and then do final comments on this. So should AI be incorporated as an important testing curriculum in examinations by professional accounting bodies? I guess I can answer that coming from the AICPA and SEMA. We're having this debate right now. So we have all of our teams looking hard at it and trying to figure this out. I think there's no question that at some point it will be involved in that. And I know many of the educators are looking at how to use it again in a responsible way in class because it's a tool. And if you use the tool properly, you'll get good stuff out of it. Comment, Steve or Brad, on that.
Yeah, I think you summarized it really well there, Tom. Go ahead, Brad.
All right.
No, I agree. I was going to say well said.
Let's see. We got, and we talked about future professions. I see. Can AI also be an ethically efficient equipment in business? Not sure what that means unless they're using ChatGPT to really look at the ethics around what your business is doing. You have any ideas about that, Steve? You're kind of in that spot.
Yeah, perhaps I'll answer it with a really quick example, which is we did some research actually in a different industry, which was healthcare, around the effects of ChatGPT in healthcare professionals. And the study was looking at creating treatment plans for patients, looking at their patient records. And the fundamental bottom line of the study was this. When doctors first looked at the summary results from the GPT model and then made a decision, the decision quality decreased. But when doctors made their decision and then checked it against the summary results of the model, the decision quality improved. So it's not so much about the technology itself, but how you use the technology in your process to support people rather than trying to replace people. And whenever that is at the forefront, that mission of saying we're going to empower and support professionals to do their jobs better through assistive approaches, in every case, we've seen the quality improve, both in terms of ethically and in terms of the outcomes.
It's funny, that's the conversation we're having with these large finance groups about all automation, not just Chat GPT, but all the other RPA and things that are happening in finance and accounting. And Gartner predicts that I think by 2030, 60% of big corporate accounting closes will be autonomous. So, but you're right, the opportunity is then to reskill, upskill, and redeploy all those people that were just moving transactions around into much higher value activities. And that's what I think we should all look at as our profession. Final comments, Brad, from you, and then we're going to close this up.
Yeah, I guess, again, keeping with the theme, this is a very exciting time. When you look, kind of do that crystal ball look in terms of where we're headed, what I'm so excited about is sort of the improvement in the user experience. If you think about it, so we have large platforms. Digital Gateway is our large tax platform that we work with clients on. For at least a generation, the focus is, how do I make the platform something that people will want to use? I think what you're starting to see now with Gen AI is, people are clamoring to use it. It's the big idea and the trick that came out was that human interaction model, that it's now easy to use the tech. And I think increasingly, that's the arc we're on. All the investments we've been making on cloud and data and AI are starting to come together. And now you're starting to see the dawn of this experience layer. So I think I'm really encouraged because I think finally sort of it's the revenge of the humans, that we don't have to bend as much in terms of how we use the tech. Now the tech is making it, intuitive for us to use. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, I think you're right. That is the way to think about this, right? What's the big opportunities in all of this for all of our professionals in the whole finance, accounting, tax arena, right? And I want to reiterate and encourage our audience to check out that CEO survey that you guys did, because it isn't all about AI, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff about tax, about ESG, talent, all those pieces are in that survey. So it's worth a read, and hopefully you'll send that out to all the folks that are on this social live broadcast today.